Hello. Donald Trump says his priority when it comes to foreign policy is to create fairer trade deals for the US and support strong borders everywhere. The US president-elect has been giving details of his foreign policy goals in an interview with British and German newspapers, The Times and Bild. The president-elect also raised the possibility of a deal with Russia. He said he'd reverse sanctions in return for Moscow substantially reducing its arsenal of nuclear weapons. He reiterated his campaign message that he wanted to get the US a fairer deal within the NATO alliance. He described it as an obsolete organisation and argued that many of the countries the US had signed up to protect did not pay their fair share. Simon Clemerson reports.
Still at his desk at the heart of his business empire. But then again, Donald Trump is striking trade deals. Well, sort of. Here's the president-elect on the UK post-Brexit.
Obama said they'll go to the back of the line, meaning if it does happen, and then he had to retract. That was a bad statement.
And now we're at the front of the queue.
I think you're doing great.
Yeah.
I think it's going great.
Not quite signing on the dotted line yet. But for Theresa May, who wants to ensure Britain can find agreements to buy and sell worldwide after leaving the EU, he is talking Turkey.
I thought the UK was so smart in getting out. I think Brexit's going to end up being a great thing. Countries want their own identity. And the UK wanted its own identity. But I do believe this, if they hadn't been forced to take in all of the refugees, so many, with all the problems that entails, I think that you wouldn't have a Brexit.
The Times newspaper, which is publishing the interview, quotes Mr Trump as saying that the new administration will work hard to get a deal with the UK done quickly. But no arrangements can be made while Britain is still negotiating its exit from the EU. A boost for the Prime Minister maybe, but then Mr Trump also says Angela Merkel is the most important EU leader, although he is highly critical of the German Chancellor's handling of the migrant crisis.
I felt she was a great leader. I think she made one very catastrophic mistake, and that was taking all of these illegals, taking all of the people from wherever they come from, and nobody really knows where they come from.
And this is how he would have stopped the mass movement across the continent.
I think we should have built safe zones in Syria. It would have been a lot less expensive. Get the Gulf states to pay for them, who aren't coming through. I mean, they've got money that nobody has, and we run it, they run it. Would have been a lot less expensive than the trauma that Germany's going through right now. But I would have said...
It's a wide-ranging interview conducted by the former Justice Secretary and Leave campaigner Michael Gove and a representative of Bild newspaper. Mr Trump had these comments on one of his most controversial policies, free trade, and how America is losing out to China.
The problem is the United States is always taken advantage of.
Yes.
We have hundreds of billions of dollars of trade deficits with China. I love free trade, but it's got to be smart trade.
Yes.
So I call it fair trade. And the problem, so I say to the people, do you want a conservative or do you want somebody who's going to make great deals? And they're all screaming, great deals, great deals. They don't care.
But very soon he'll be leaving this office for the Oval Office. And then the attention will be on what he does and not just what he says. Simon Clemerson, BBC News.
Meanwhile, the outgoing director of the CIA has said Mr Trump doesn't fully understand Russia's actions, intentions and capabilities. John Brennan said that when in office, Mr Trump should be very careful about lifting sanctions against Moscow unless it changed its behaviour. Here's our Washington correspondent Laura Bicker.
The President-elect of the United States, Donald John Trump.
The stage is set and rehearsals are underway for the moment when Donald Trump will take the oath of office. But some feel the 45th president could do with being more presidential. He's accused US spies of leaking an unverified dossier of claims that the Trump campaign team had close links with Russia, and he compared their actions to Nazi Germany. This prompted a stern warning from the head of the CIA to be more careful with his words.
The world is watching now what Mr. Trump says and listening very carefully. So I think Mr. Trump has to be very disciplined in terms of what it is that he says publicly. He is going to be, in a few days' time, the most powerful person in the world in terms of sitting on top of the United States government. And I think he has to recognize that his words do have impact.
But Mr. Trump is not backing down, and of course, he took to Twitter, saying the intelligence agencies made a mistake and urged them to apologise. The next Commander-in-Chief is proving to be just as divisive a president-elect as he was a candidate. Not only has he started a war of words with the very people who keep America safe, he's now become embroiled in a row with one of this nation's most respected civil rights heroes.
It's going to be very difficult. I don't see this president-elect as a legitimate president.
John Lewis marched alongside Martin Luther King. His words matter to the black community. Donald Trump attacked him on Twitter, prompting criticism from within his own party. But the vice president-elect defended his boss.
Well, I have great respect for John Lewis and for his contributions, particularly to the civil rights movement. I was deeply disappointed to see someone of his stature question the legitimacy of Donald Trump's election as president and say he's not attending the inauguration. And I hope he reconsiders both positions.
As Washington awaits crowds of Trump supporters, it's also preparing for dozens of protest marches. This inauguration week and this particular piece of historical political theatre will usher in a new, controversial era in US politics. Laura Bicker, BBC News, Washington.